The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune at 11:47 p.m. as I checked the schedule taped to the manager's office door. 3 names I didn't recognize, all scheduled for their first night shift training. Great. Another batch of summer kids who thought working nights at McDonald's would be easy money. I'd been doing this for 8 years now. 8 years of watching teenagers waltz in here thinking they knew better, thinking the rules were suggestions, thinking I was just some bitter old-timer trying to make their lives difficult. Most of them lasted 2 weeks. The smart ones quit after the first night. The really smart ones never came back after orientation. The restaurant felt different at night. During the day, it was chaos. Screaming kids, harried parents, the constant beep of fryers and timers. But after the dinner rush died down and the last stragglers cleared out, the place took on a different personality. Shadows seemed longer. The cheerful yellow and red color scheme looked garish under the harsh fluorescence. Even the damn clown mascot looked more sinister when you caught him in your peripheral vision. You, Marcus? I turned to see a lanky kid with bleached hair and an oversized confidence that screamed trouble. Had to be 17, maybe 18, with the kind of smirk that said he'd never met a rule he couldn't bend. His uniform was already wrinkled, name tag crooked, shoes that had seen better days. Classic summer hire, figured he'd coast through 3 months and bank some easy cash. That's Mr. Torres to you. I grabbed my clipboard and headed toward the counter. You're early? Good. The others here yet? Yeah, there's some quiet kid by the registers and another guy who's been making jokes about everything since he walked in. He followed me, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I'm Jake, by the way, Jake Morrison. The loud one. I could already tell. Probably used to being the class clown, thought charm and attitude could get him out of anything. We'd see how long that lasted. Near the front registers, I spotted the other 2. A nervous-looking girl with dark hair pulled back tight, constantly checking her phone and glancing around like she expected something to jump out at her. She had that deer-in-headlights look that screamed first job ever. Her uniform was pristine, name tag perfectly straight, like she'd practiced putting it on at home. The nervous one, definitely. Beside her, a heavy-set guy with an easy grin was attempting to balance a salt shaker on the edge of a napkin dispenser. Everything about him radiated laid-back energy, loose shoelaces, untucked shirt, the kind of guy who probably showed up 5 minutes late to everything and somehow made it work. He had the build of someone who played football until he discovered video games were more fun. All right, gather round. I clapped my hands once, sharp enough to get their attention. I'm Marcus Torres, night shift supervisor. For the next few hours, I'm your teacher, your boss, and possibly the only thing standing between you and a very bad time. Jake snorted, rolling his eyes. Dude, it's McDonald's. How bad could it be? We flip burgers, take orders, clean some stuff. I've got this. I let that hang in the air for a moment, studying his face. They always said something like that. The cocky ones especially. They had no concept of what night shift really meant. What's your name? I pointed at the nervous girl. Sarah Chen. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. This is my first job. My first real job. I worked at my aunt's flower shop once, but that was just... And you? I looked at the guy with the salt shaker, who was now trying to spin it like a basketball on his finger. Tommy Rodriguez. Nice to meet you, Mr. Torres. He gave me a mock salute, grinning like everything was one big joke, ready to flip some burgers and take some names, or take some burgers and flip some names. However, this works. Jake laughed at that. Sarah managed a weak smile. Tommy seemed pleased with himself for breaking the tension. I studied the 3 of them. Jake with his cocky attitude and designer jeans that probably cost more than I made in a week. Sarah practically vibrating with anxiety, checking her phone every 30 seconds like her mother might text her an escape plan. Tommy treating everything like a joke, probably figured this job was just a way to fund his gaming habit or whatever kids spent money on these days. Standard issue summer crew. They had no idea what they were walking into. None of them ever did. Before we start anything, you need to understand something. I set my clipboard down and faced them directly. Night shift isn't like day shift. Different rules apply, stricter rules. Rules that might not make sense to you at first, but rules you will follow without question, without hesitation, without discussion. Are we clear? Crystal, Jake said with that smirk still plastered across his face. He exchanged a look with Tommy like they were sharing some private joke about the crazy supervisor. Sarah nodded earnestly. Yes, sir. I mean, yes, Mr. Torres. Absolutely, boss man, Tommy added, still grinning. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my back pocket. The same list I'd been refining for years, written in my careful handwriting. The edges were worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. The rules that kept people safe, the rules that kept people breathing, the rules that most people thought were the paranoid ramblings of someone who'd worked too many late shifts. Rule 1. No customers before 2 a.m. I don't care if someone's knocking, banging, screaming, crying, or claiming they're dying. You do not open that door. You do not acknowledge whoever's out there. You do not even look in their direction until the clock hits 2:01. Tommy's eyebrows shot up. What if it's like an emergency? What if someone's hurt? What if it's a cop? Rule 1, I repeated, my voice flat. No exceptions. Ever. Sarah shifted nervously, her phone buzzing. She glanced at it quickly before looking back up. But isn't that like illegal? Refusing to help someone? What if we get in trouble? You want to know what trouble looks like? Trouble is not following Rule 1. I continued before they could ask more questions. Rule 2. The ice cream machine gets powered down at 2:30 a.m. sharp, even if it's working perfectly, even if someone orders a McFlurry at 2:29, even if corporate calls and demands to know why our ice cream sales are down, you shut it down. Okay, now I know you're messing with us, Jake laughed, shaking his head. Why would we turn off a working machine? That's just bad business. We'd lose money. The manager would fire us. I continued without acknowledging him. Rule 3. If the fryer turns on by itself, and yes, it will turn on by itself, you immediately cut the main breaker for the entire kitchen, and all 4 of us stand in the walk-in freezer for exactly 90 seconds. Count them out loud. Together. The laughter died on Jake's lips. Tommy stopped playing with the salt shaker, his hand freezing mid-spin. Sarah's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Wait, what do you mean, it will turn on by itself? Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Machines don't just do that. Rule 4, drive-through after 3 a.m. You hand out the order, you take the money, you make change if necessary, but you do not look into the car. Eyes on the bag, eyes on your hands, eyes on the register, eyes anywhere but in that car. You don't make conversation. You don't ask how their night is going. You don't even say thank you. What kind of rules are these? Sarah whispered, her knuckles white around her phone. Rule 5. If you hear movement in the play place ball pit, you do not investigate. You do not go near it. You do not mention it to the others unless I bring it up first. You pretend you heard nothing, and you continue doing whatever you were doing. Dude, this is some elaborate prank, right? Jake looked around as if expecting cameras to emerge from behind the beverage station. Like some kind of hazing thing for new employees? Scare the summer kids? Rule 6. Check the soda machine every 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16. Every 15 minutes exactly. If any of the syrup has turned black, and I mean any flavor, even the clear ones, shut down the entire fountain system immediately. Not just that flavor, the whole system. Unplug it from the wall. Tommy had gone quiet, his earlier joviality replaced by uncertainty. Mr. Torres, these rules are pretty specific, like really specific. How do you even know about the syrup thing? Rule 7. Never, under any circumstances, open the dumpster after 3:30 a.m. If you hear it shaking, moving, rattling, or making any noise whatsoever, you lock the back door immediately and stay inside until dawn. You don't investigate. You don't peek through the window. You don't even think about going out there. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in my pocket. The 3 of them stared at me in various stages of disbelief and confusion. Good. Better confused and alive than confident and dead. Those are the rules. They're not suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're not company policy that you can ignore if nobody's watching. They're absolutes. You follow them exactly as I've told you, or you find another job. Questions? Jake found his voice first, though it came out smaller than before. Yeah, I've got questions, like, what kind of messed up McDonald's is this? Are you seriously trying to tell us that what? That strange things happen on the night shift? I checked my watch. 12:23 a.m. You've got about an hour and a half before you find out whether I'm serious or not. This is insane, Sarah whispered, gripping her phone like it might somehow transport her home. No, insane is thinking you can work nights in a place like this without following the rules. I moved behind the counter and started checking equipment, going through my usual routine. Fryer temperature, grill cleaned and ready, registers booted up properly. Tommy, you're on fries tonight. Sarah, you'll handle the register when we open at 2 a.m. Jake, you're with me on prep work and general duties. When we open? Jake followed me toward the kitchen area, his earlier swagger replaced by genuine confusion. I thought McDonald's was 24 hours. The sign outside says 24 hours. Not this one. Not between midnight and 2 a.m. I handed him an apron that had seen better days. That's part of Rule 1. We're closed to customers, but we stay here. We work. We prepare. We wait. For the next hour, I walked them through the basics. How to work the fryer without burning yourself or half the kitchen. How to use the register system without accidentally voiding transactions. Where we keep the cleaning supplies and which chemicals you never, ever mix together. Standard training stuff, but I could see them all glancing at each other every few minutes, still processing what I'd told them about the rules. Tommy adapted quickest to the fryer, his natural coordination making up for his lack of experience. He had good instincts about timing and temperature, didn't panic when the oil bubbled up. Sarah was methodical with the register, double-checking everything but getting it right. She asked good questions about procedures and wrote down important details in a little notebook she'd brought. Jake had good instincts but kept asking questions about the weird rules every few minutes instead of focusing on what I was trying to teach him. So, like hypothetically, Jake said while restocking napkins for the third time, his hands busy, but his mind clearly elsewhere. What happens if someone does open the door before 2 a.m.? Hypothetically, that person doesn't work here anymore. Because they get fired? I stopped what I was doing and looked at him directly. Because they don't work here anymore. The distinction seemed to register with him because he went quiet for a while after that, focusing on his tasks with new intensity. At 1:47 a.m., I was showing Sarah how to reset the register when a transaction got stuck halfway through processing when we heard it. 3 sharp knocks on the front door. Rap, rap, rap. All 3 of them turned toward the sound, like deer hearing a gunshot. Jake actually took a step forward, his instincts still telling him to help whoever was outside. Rule 1, I said firmly, not moving from behind the register. But someone's out there. Sarah pointed toward the entrance, her voice tight with concern. What if they really need help? The knocking came again. Rap, rap, rap. More insistent this time, with a rhythm that seemed almost demanding. Jake was halfway to the door before I caught his arm. Where exactly do you think you're going? To see who it is. Maybe they need help. Maybe it's an emergency. He tried to pull away, but I held firm. What time is it? He glanced at his phone, the screen illuminating his increasingly pale face. 1:49. And what does Rule 1 say? No customers before 2 a.m., but nothing. I kept my grip on his arm as the knocking continued, each impact echoing through the empty restaurant. You stand right here and you wait 11 minutes. The knocking stopped, then started again, louder this time. Bang, bang, bang. Sarah jumped, nearly dropping her phone. Tommy dropped the fry basket he was holding, sending frozen fries scattering across the floor in a shower of ice crystals. Jesus Christ, Jake muttered, but he stopped trying to move toward the door. Bang, bang, bang. How long does this usually last? Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding. Depends. I checked my watch. 1:52. Sometimes they give up after a few minutes. Sometimes they keep trying until exactly 2 a.m. They? Tommy had gone pale, his usual grin nowhere to be found. Who's they? I didn't answer. The banging was getting more frantic now, multiple hands hitting the glass doors with enough force to make the whole entrance shudder. But I'd learned years ago not to look, not to try to see who or what was making the noise. That way lay madness, or worse. 8 minutes, I announced calmly, like I was timing something in the oven. Jake's cocky attitude had evaporated completely, replaced by something approaching real fear. Mr. Torres, what the hell is going on? This isn't normal. This isn't right. Night shift, I said simply, checking my watch again. The banging continued for another 6 minutes, growing more violent until I was sure the reinforced glass would finally give way. The whole building seemed to shake with each impact. Sarah had backed against the far wall, clutching her phone so hard I thought she might crack the screen. Tommy kept looking between me and the door like he couldn't decide which one might save him. Jake stood frozen in place, all his earlier bravado gone. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., it stopped. Complete silence. Not even the hum of the refrigeration unit seemed to make a sound. I walked over and flipped the door locks, then switched on the open sign that cast its cheerful red glow into the night. Now we're ready for customers. All three of them stared at me, then at the doors, then back at me. I could practically see their worldviews reshaping themselves around what they'd just experienced. What just happened? Sarah's voice was barely audible. Rule 1, I said, heading back to the counter like nothing unusual had occurred. No customers before 2 a.m. They followed me like lost puppies, their earlier skepticism replaced by something much more useful. Fear. Healthy, respectful fear. Good. Maybe these kids would actually listen now. Maybe they'd make it through the summer after all. The first customer came through at 2:13 a.m. A perfectly normal-looking guy in a Honda Civic, ordered a Big Mac meal and a coffee, paid with exact change, said thank you, and drove off without incident. Sarah handled the transaction flawlessly, her hands only shaking slightly as she counted back his change. See? Jake said, trying to reclaim some of his earlier bravado. Normal customer, normal night. Maybe that knocking thing was just, I don't know, kids messing around or something. I didn't bother responding. It was always like this after the first incident. They'd convinced themselves it was explainable, that the rules were just paranoid precautions from someone who'd worked too many late shifts. Give it an hour. Tommy, how are those fries looking? I called over to the fryer station. Golden brown and delicious, he replied, though his usual grin was strained. He'd been quieter since the knocking, stealing glances at the front doors every few minutes like he expected them to start shaking again. The next few minutes passed quietly. A handful of customers trickled through the drive-thru, mostly late shift workers grabbing coffee or food on their way home. A nurse from the hospital down the road who always ordered the same thing, black coffee and an apple pie. A security guard who came by every night around this time, usually getting a quarter pounder and fries. A trucker who knew better than to ask questions when I told him we were out of ice cream, even though he could clearly see the machine running behind me. Sarah was getting more comfortable with the register, her movements becoming smoother and more confident. She'd stopped checking her phone every 30 seconds and was actually focusing on the work. Tommy had settled into a rhythm with the fryer, timing his drops perfectly so orders didn't sit under the heat lamps too long. Even Jake was pulling his weight, restocking supplies and keeping the prep areas clean without being told. You know, Jake said around 2:28 a.m. while wiping down tables, this isn't so bad. Kind of peaceful, actually. Way better than dealing with screaming kids and soccer moms during lunch rush. Don't get comfortable, I warned, checking my watch. It was exactly 2:30 a.m. Why not? Everything's been normal for almost an hour now. Jake gestured around the quiet restaurant. Maybe the night shift isn't as crazy as you made it sound. I walked over to the ice cream machine and started the shutdown procedure immediately. The soft serve was the perfect consistency. The machine had been cleaned properly that afternoon and there was no mechanical reason to power it down. But rules were rules. Hey, what are you doing? Sarah looked over from the register. A customer just asked if we have shakes available. Tell them the machine's down for cleaning. But it's working fine. I can see it's working fine. Rule 2, I said, flipping the main power switch. The machine's gentle humming died with a mechanical sigh. Ice cream machine gets powered down at 2:30 a.m. sharp. Jake rolled his eyes but said nothing this time. Progress. The rules aren't suggestions. They're not flexible. They exist for a reason. I finished shutting down the machine and made a note on my checklist. Tommy, you're supposed to be keeping track of time too. This isn't just on me. Tommy raised his hand like he was in school. What happens if we don't shut down the machine? Nothing good. But specifically, nothing good, I repeated firmly. Some things you don't need details about. You just need to follow the rules. Trust me, you don't want to find out what happens when you don't. The drive-through buzzer chimed and Sarah moved to take the order. A woman wanted a McFlurry. Sarah glanced at me, then back at her register. I'm sorry, our ice cream machine is down for maintenance right now. Can I get you something else? When will it be working again? The woman's voice crackled through the speaker, tinged with the kind of irritation that suggested she'd been driving around looking for ice cream for a while. Sarah looked at me again. I held up 7 fingers. It should be back up around 7 a.m. The woman grumbled something about typical McDonald's, but ordered a coffee and apple pie instead. Crisis averted. Good, I told Sarah after the customer drove off. That's exactly how you handle it. No explanations beyond basic courtesy, no apologies for company policy. The machine is down, end of discussion. But what if they get really angry? What if they demand to speak to a manager? You tell them the manager isn't available and the policy stands. If they want to complain, they can call corporate during business hours. I checked the coffee levels while I talked. Most people will grumble and order something else. The ones who don't, well, those aren't the kind of customers we want to keep happy anyway. By 3 a.m., the restaurant had settled into the strange rhythm of late-night service. Orders came in sporadically, sometimes 3 cars in a row, sometimes 20 minutes between customers. The recruits were starting to understand the flow, anticipating what needed to be done without being told. Jake had stopped making jokes about the rules. Sarah was checking the time more frequently, clearly trying to stay aware of when procedures needed to happen. Tommy was methodically working his way through the cleaning checklist, making sure everything stayed spotless. I was almost starting to think they might be naturals at this. That's when the soda machine incident happened. Mr. Torres? Sarah's voice was tight with uncertainty. I'm doing the 15-minute check on the soda fountain and something's wrong. I was across the kitchen in seconds. Sarah stood in front of the drink station, pointing at the Sprite dispenser. The syrup line that should have been clear was running black as motor oil. Jesus, Tommy whispered, abandoning his mop to come look. What is that stuff? I didn't answer. I was already moving, hitting the main power switch for the entire fountain system. The gentle hum of the carbonation pumps died immediately. Whoa, hold on, Jake protested. It's just one line that's messed up. Why shut down the whole system? Rule 6, I said, already unplugging the main power cord from the wall. If any of the syrup turns black, shut down the entire fountain system immediately. But what if a customer wants a Coke or root beer? Those lines are fine. Rule 6 says the whole system. I tested each dispenser to make sure they were completely dead. Not just the affected line, the whole system. Sarah was staring at the black liquid that had pooled in the catch tray. What is it? What causes that? Nothing you need to worry about as long as you follow the rules. I grabbed the sanitizer spray and began cleaning up the black syrup. It had an oily consistency and a smell like burnt metal mixed with something organic and rotting. Tommy, grab some gloves and help me clean this up. Sarah, if anyone asks about drinks, we've got bottled water and coffee. That's it until morning. This is insane, Jake muttered, but he said it quietly, like he didn't really want me to hear. The black syrup took longer to clean than it should have. It seemed to stick to everything, leaving dark stains that required multiple passes with industrial degreaser to remove completely. Worse, it seemed to spread on its own, creeping along surfaces even when we weren't touching it. By the time we finished, it was 3:12 a.m., and I was starting to sweat despite the air conditioning. Why don't you just call a repair service? Sarah asked, while I was disposing of the contaminated cleaning supplies in a special bag that would go directly into the dumpster. This seems like a health code violation or something. Because it'll be fine by morning, I said, sealing the bag carefully. It always is. Always? This has happened before. Every few weeks, sometimes more often during certain times of year. I washed my hands thoroughly, scrubbing under my nails with a brush. The day shift never has problems with it, only happens at night. Jake was staring at the now silent drink station like it might suddenly spring back to life and spray more black liquid everywhere. That doesn't make sense. Equipment doesn't just randomly malfunction on a schedule. Nothing about night shift makes sense until you've been doing it long enough. I dried my hands and checked the time. Which reminds me, we're coming up on 3:15. Drive-through procedures change after 3 a.m. Change how? Tommy asked, though he was eyeing the drink station nervously. You hand out the order, you take payment, but you don't look into the car. Eyes down, focus on what you're doing, don't make conversation beyond the absolute minimum. Why not? Rule 4. As if summoned by our conversation, the drive-through motion sensor chimed. A car was approaching. I moved to the window and gestured for the others to gather around where they could observe. The headlights were too bright. That was the first thing I noticed as the vehicle pulled up to the speaker. Not just bright, they seemed to cut through the darkness with an intensity that made my eyes water even from inside the building. They cast stark shadows that moved wrong, shifting and wavering like they were alive. Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order? Sarah's voice was steady, professional. 2 cheeseburgers, no pickles. Large fries, large Coke. The voice was perfectly normal, polite, clear, Nothing unusual about the words or pronunciation, but something felt wrong in a way I couldn't put my finger on. Maybe it was the lack of background noise. No radio, no engine sounds, nothing but that voice. "I'm sorry, our drink fountain is down for maintenance. I can offer you bottled water or coffee instead." "Water's fine." The car moved forward to the payment window. Through the bulletproof glass, I could see the outline of someone in the driver's seat, but the headlights created such a glare that details were impossible to make out. The silhouette looked human enough, but something about the proportions seemed off. "Remember," I whispered to Sarah. "Eyes down." She nodded, taking a deep breath as she slid the window open. The order total was $8.47, a perfectly normal amount. The customer handed over exact change, bills that felt normal, coins that clinked with the right metallic sound. But Sarah kept her eyes focused on her hands, counting the money without looking up. "Thank you," she said, closing the cash drawer. "Your order will be ready in just a moment." Jake was already bagging the food, moving with unusual efficiency for someone who'd been goofing off most of the night. Tommy had the fries ready, properly salted and packaged. I grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. Sarah opened the window again and handed out the bag and water bottle. "Have a good night." "Thank you." The car didn't move immediately. It sat there idling, headlights still blazing, engine making a soft rumbling sound that seemed deeper than it should be. I counted the seconds. 10, 15, 20. "Is everything okay?" Sarah whispered, still keeping her eyes down. "Don't look," I warned. "Don't say anything else." 30 seconds. 40. The headlights seemed to be getting brighter, and I could swear I heard something like breathing coming from the driver's seat, slow and deliberate. The kind of breathing you'd hear from something much larger than a human. Then, without warning, the car pulled away. The headlights swept across the building as it turned back toward the main road, leaving spots dancing in my vision, and an afterimage that looked wrong, like the light had been a different color than it should have been. We all stood there in silence for a moment, listening to the engine noise fade into the distance. "What the hell was that?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "A customer," I said simply. "That wasn't a normal customer." Tommy was pale, gripping the edge of the counter. "Those headlights were wrong. Everything about that was wrong." "But you followed the procedure correctly," I told Sarah. "Eyes down, minimal conversation, handed out the order and let them leave on their own timeline." "Why couldn't I look at them?" "Rule 4. Drive through after 3 a.m., you don't look into the car." "But why? What would have happened if I looked?" I considered how to answer that, how much truth they could handle at this point. "Nothing good," I said finally. "The rules exist to keep you safe, to keep all of us safe." Jake was staring out the drive-through window like he expected the car to come back. "This job is seriously messed up. This job pays $2 above minimum wage for work that mostly involves standing around and following simple instructions," I replied. "If you can't handle the rules, there are plenty of other places hiring." But even as I said it, I could see the change in them. The way they moved more carefully now, checked the time more frequently, looked to me for guidance before making decisions. The casual dismissiveness from earlier was gone, replaced by the kind of healthy caution that might actually keep them alive. Sarah was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "The knocking earlier, the soda machine, that car, this isn't normal, is it? None of this is normal." "Define normal," I said. "Is it normal for a McDonald's? Number, is it normal for this McDonald's during night shift?" "Absolutely." Tommy laughed, but it came out shaky. "Man, they did not prepare us for this in orientation. Day shift orientation covers day shift procedures. Night shift is different." I checked my watch. 3:24 a.m. Still hours to go before dawn, and we were only getting started. "But you're all adapting well, better than most." "Most?" Jake looked at me sharply. "How many people have you trained for this?" "Enough." I started cleaning the drive-through area, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Some listen to the rules, some don't. The ones who listen tend to make it through the summer. And the ones who don't. I didn't answer. Some truths were better discovered gradually, earned through experience rather than explained up front. They were doing well so far, following instructions without too much argument, supporting each other, staying alert. Maybe these kids really would make it. The rest of the hour passed quietly. A few more normal customers, routine cleaning tasks, standard procedures. But I could see the recruits watching everything with new eyes now, paying attention to details they'd missed before. The way shadows moved differently in certain corners. The soft sounds that didn't match any equipment they could identify. The feeling that they were being observed even when the dining room was empty. By 4 a.m., they were asking fewer questions and following instructions more readily. When I told them to restock something, they did it immediately. When I mentioned checking the time, they all glanced at their phones or the register display. When the drive-thru chimed, they positioned themselves to observe and learn. They were becoming a team. A night shift crew that might actually work. And that, more than anything else, gave me hope that they'd survive what was still to come. The next hour and a half passed in deceptive calm. A few more normal customers, mostly hospital workers grabbing coffee before their shifts ended. Sarah had found her rhythm with the register, no longer hesitating over basic transactions. Tommy kept the fryer station spotless, timing his drops perfectly. Even Jake had stopped questioning every procedure, though I caught him glancing nervously at the soda fountain every time he passed it. By 5:30 a.m., I was starting to think we might coast through to dawn without major incident. The recruits were following protocols automatically now, checking the time without being reminded, maintaining proper spacing during drive-thru transactions, keeping their voices low and movements deliberate. That should have been my first warning. Night shift was never that cooperative. "Mr. Torres?" Sarah called from the register area. "Should I start the coffee for the breakfast prep?" "Not until 6 a.m., I replied, wiping down the prep counters for the third time that hour. "We maintain minimal operation until..." The fryer clicked on. All four of us froze. The digital display showed the oil temperature climbing steadily, 200 degrees, 220, 250. The heating elements glowed angry orange beneath the oil, and the familiar hum of the filtration system filled the kitchen. Nobody had touched the controls. Nobody had been near the fryer station for 10 minutes. "Rule 3, I said, my voice cutting through the sudden tension. "Now." I was already moving toward the electrical panel, muscle memory taking over. 8 years of night shifts had trained me for this moment. Behind me, I heard the recruits scrambling to follow. "The breaker?" Tommy called out, abandoning his mop mid-stroke. "Main kitchen breaker, red switch, flip it down." I yanked open the electrical panel door. "Everyone to the freezer, now." Sarah dropped what she was doing and headed for the walk-in cooler. Jake hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, staring at the fryer like he couldn't believe what was happening, before following her. Tommy was right behind them. I killed the main breaker. The kitchen plunged into relative darkness, illuminated only by the emergency lighting and the glow from the front counter. The fryer's heating elements died instantly, but I could still hear the oil bubbling angrily. 90 seconds, I announced, pulling the freezer door shut behind us. "Count out loud, together." The walk-in cooler was cramped with 4 people inside. Sarah pressed herself against the shelving, trying to stay warm in the sudden cold. Tommy and Jake stood shoulder to shoulder, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "1, Sarah started, her breath visible in the frigid air. 2, Tommy joined in. 3, Jake added reluctantly. 4, I watched their faces in the dim emergency lighting that filtered through the small window in the freezer door. Fear, confusion, but also focus. They were following the rule exactly, no questions, no hesitation. 25, 26. The cold was biting now, seeping through our uniforms. Sarah was shivering, but she kept counting. Tommy stuffed his hands in his pockets but maintained the rhythm. Jake's teeth were starting to chatter. Through the small window, I could see the kitchen beyond. Dark, silent, but somehow watchful. Sometimes, during these 90-second waits, you'd see things moving in the shadows. Equipment that shouldn't be running. Shapes that didn't match any of the standard restaurant fixtures. Sarah's lips were turning blue. Tommy was doing a little shuffle to keep warm. Jake had given up any pretense of toughness and was openly shivering. 79. 80. Almost there. The longest 90 seconds of their lives, probably. I remembered my first time in the freezer, convinced I was going to freeze to death because some crazy supervisor had impossible rules about kitchen equipment. 89. 90. I pushed the door open and we spilled out into the relatively warm kitchen. Sarah gasped in relief, rubbing her arms to restore circulation. Tommy immediately started moving around to warm up. Jake just stood there, staring at the now silent Fryer. "What was that?" he asked quietly. "What just happened?" I flipped the main breaker back up. The kitchen hummed back to life. Refrigeration units, ventilation fans, the normal sounds of a functioning restaurant. The fryer remained off. "Rule 3, I said simply. "Fryer turns on by itself. You cut the breaker and stand in the freezer for 90 seconds. "But why? What's the point of that?" "The point is that you're all still here." I checked the fryer controls. Everything was in the off position, exactly as it should be. Sometimes the equipment does things it's not supposed to do. Sometimes it's better to get out of the way and let it finish whatever it's doing. Sarah was still shivering. "Has that happened before?" "Every few weeks, usually around this time of night." I turned the fryer back to its normal settings. Within seconds, it was heating up normally. No mysterious activation, no glowing elements that shouldn't be on. Day shift thinks there's an electrical problem. They've had repair crews out here 6 times in the past year. And they never find anything wrong, Tommy guessed. "Never find anything wrong," I confirmed. Jake was staring at the fryer like it might explode. "This is insane. Equipment doesn't just turn itself on. There has to be a logical explanation." "Rule 3 doesn't require a logical explanation. It just requires that you follow it." I checked my watch. 5:47 a.m., still more than an hour until sunrise. "Good job, all of you. Fast response, no hesitation, proper procedure." They looked at each other, and I could see something had changed. The fryer incident had been different from the knocking or the drive-through customer. This was something that had happened inside their workspace, something that could have hurt them if they'd been standing too close when it activated. "Are we safe here?" Sarah asked quietly. "As long as you follow the rules, yes." "And if we don't follow the rules?" I didn't answer that. Some questions were better left unasked. We'd just gotten back to normal operations when the next incident started. It began as a soft sound from the dining area, a gentle rustling like someone shifting around in the place ball pit. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would normally catch your attention over the ambient noise of the restaurant, but it was 6:03 a.m. The place had been empty since we opened at 2 a.m. I held up one hand, signaling for silence. All 3 recruits stopped what they were doing and listened. Rustle. Pause. Rustle. "What is that?" Tommy whispered. "Rule 5, I said quietly. "If you hear movement in the place ball pit, you don't investigate." The rustling continued, growing slightly louder. It sounded like someone, or something, was moving around inside the colorful plastic balls, shifting and settling, getting comfortable. "Should we check if someone's in there?" Sarah asked. "What if it's a kid who got left behind somehow?" "Rule 5, you don't go near it." The movement was getting more pronounced now. Not just rustling, but what sounded like deliberate motion. Something large moving through the balls, creating waves and patterns in the plastic sea. "This is crazy," Jake muttered. "We can't just ignore." The windows started rattling. It began softly, just a slight vibration in the glass panels that separated the place from the main dining area. Then it intensified, becoming a steady tremor that made the entire structure shake. "Nobody moves," I said firmly. "Stay exactly where you are." The rattling grew louder, more violent. The windows were flexing in their frames, bowing inward and outward like they were breathing. The sound was getting inside my head, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to match my heartbeat. Sarah grabbed Tommy's arm, her knuckles white with fear. Jake had gone pale, staring at the place like he expected the glass to shatter at any moment. The movement in the ball pit was frantic now, like something large was thrashing around inside. Plastic balls were flying everywhere, bouncing off the walls and ceiling of the play structure. But through the rattling windows, we couldn't see what was causing it. "How long does this last?" Tommy asked through gritted teeth. "Until it stops," I replied. The rattling reached a crescendo, the windows flexing so violently I was sure they'd finally give way. The sound was deafening now, drowning out everything else. Sarah had her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. Jake was backing toward the kitchen, his fight-or-flight instincts finally kicking in. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Complete silence. The windows settled back into their frames. The ball pit went still. Even the normal restaurant sounds seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. We stood there for a long moment, listening to our own heartbeats and the distant hum of the air conditioning. "What the hell was that?" Jake's voice cracked on the last word. "Rule 5, I said. "If you hear movement in the place ball pit, you don't go near it." But what was causing it? What was in there? I walked over to the windows and looked into the place. The ball pit looked perfectly normal. Colorful plastic balls arranged in neat patterns, playground equipment clean and undisturbed. No sign that anything unusual had happened. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing in there." Sarah joined me at the window, still shaking. But we heard it. We all heard it. Yes, we did. So, what was making the noise? Rule 5 doesn't require an explanation. It just requires that you don't investigate. Jake was staring at the place like it might come alive again. "This job is going to give me nightmares. Only if you make it through the night," I said. That got their attention. All three of them looked at me with new understanding. This wasn't just about following weird rules or dealing with strange customers. This was about survival. "Mr. Torres," Sarah said quietly, "exactly how dangerous is this job?" Before I could answer, we heard it. A sound from outside, behind the restaurant. A deep, rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from the dumpster area. My blood went cold. I checked my watch. 6:18 a.m. Well past 3:30. Thump, thump, thump. "Back door," I said urgently. "Lock it, now." Tommy was closest to the rear exit. He ran across the kitchen and threw the deadbolt just as the thumping intensified. The sound was getting more violent, like something massive was throwing itself against the inside of the dumpster. The metal was groaning under the impact, and I could hear the entire container rocking back and forth. "What is that?" Sarah whispered. "Rule 7, I said, backing away from the rear of the building. "Never open the dumpster after 3:30 a.m. If it shakes, lock the back door." The noise was deafening now. It sounded like the dumpster was going to tear itself apart. Through the small window in the back door, I could see the massive container lurching back and forth, tilting up on its wheels before crashing back down. "Should we call someone?" Jake asked. "The police? Animal control? And tell them what? That our dumpster is haunted?" I kept everyone away from the back wall. "We stay inside, we keep that door locked, and we wait for it to stop." Something was definitely inside that dumpster, something large enough to make the entire container move. But what could be that big? And how had it gotten in there? "This is insane," Tommy said, but he wasn't questioning the procedure anymore. He was just stating a fact. The violence continued for another 10 minutes. 10 minutes of thunderous impacts, screeching metal, and the sound of something that definitely shouldn't be in a restaurant dumpster trying to get out. Then, like the other incidents, it stopped. Total silence from outside. No more thumping, no more crashing. Just the normal sounds of early morning, distant traffic, birds starting to sing as dawn approached. "Is it over?" Sarah asked. I checked my watch. 6:31 a.m. Sunrise was still 30 minutes away, but the worst of the night was behind us. "For now," I said. We all stood there, processing what we just experienced. 3 major incidents in less than an hour. The fryer, the place, and the dumpster. Any one of them would have been enough to send most new employees running for the exit. But these 3 were still here. Scared, confused, but following the rules. "You all did good," I said finally. "Really good. Fast responses, no panic, proper procedures. I'm impressed." Jake let out a shaky laugh. "Impressed? We're probably traumatized for life. But you're alive, and you're still here. That's more than I can say for a lot of people who've worked night shift." Sarah was looking at me with new respect. "You really do know what you're doing, don't you?" 8 years of experience, I replied. 8 years of learning that the rules exist for a reason. Tommy unlocked the back door and peered outside through the window. "The dumpster looks normal now. It always does by morning. What's in there during the day?" "Garbage, just garbage." I started cleaning up the kitchen, getting ready for the breakfast prep crew that would arrive at 7 a.m. Whatever happens at night stays at night. The 3 recruits looked at each other, and I could see they were making a decision. They could quit right now, walk out, and never come back. Find safer jobs at normal restaurants where the equipment didn't turn itself on and the dumpsters didn't try to break free from their moorings. But they didn't. They picked up their cleaning supplies and got back to work. Jake was the first to speak. "So, what time do we come in tomorrow night?" "Same time, 11:30 p.m. for prep, open at 2 a.m. And we'll follow all the rules?" "Every single one." Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, I mean, this is terrifying, but we made it through, right? We survived." "You more than survived," I said, and I meant it. "You adapted. You worked as a team. You trusted the procedures even when they didn't make sense." Tommy grinned, and for the first time all night, it looked genuine. "So we're really going to do this? Work the night shift at the haunted McDonald's?" "It's not haunted," I corrected. "It's just different. And as long as you follow the rules, it's manageable." Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was still 20 minutes away, but you could feel the night losing its grip on the building. The oppressive atmosphere was lifting, replaced by the normal energy of a functioning restaurant. "The breakfast crew will be here soon," I announced. "Time to get everything ready for normal operations." As we worked, I watched the 3 recruits with growing pride. They moved with purpose now, checking procedures without being told, supporting each other through tasks, maintaining awareness of their surroundings. They'd been tested, and they'd passed. Maybe these kids really were going to make it through the summer. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to training the night shift. The last few hours passed in tense quiet, but it was a different kind of tension than we'd experienced all night. The oppressive weight that had hung over the restaurant since midnight was slowly lifting, replaced by something that felt almost like relief. The fluorescent lights seemed less harsh, the shadows less threatening. Even the constant hum of the equipment sounded more like a lullaby than a warning. I found myself watching the 3 recruits with something I hadn't felt in years: genuine pride. Jake was methodically wiping down every surface in the prep area, his earlier cockiness replaced by focused determination. Sarah moved between tasks with quiet efficiency, checking the register receipts and organizing the money drops. Tommy kept the fryer station spotless, humming softly under his breath, the first time I'd heard anyone hum during a night shift in 8 years. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "you 3 actually did it." Jake looked up from scrubbing the prep counter. "Did what? Survive?" "More than that. You adapted. You worked as a team. You followed the rules even when they didn't make sense." I checked my watch. 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes until the morning crew arrived. That's more than I can say for most people who work night shift here. Sarah glanced up from counting register receipts. "It still doesn't feel real. Like, did all that stuff actually happen? The knocking, the soda machine, that car?" "The fryer turning itself on," Tommy added, shaking his head. "And don't get me started on whatever was in that play place." "Or the dumpster," Jake said with a visible shudder. I nodded. "It happened, all of it. And you handled every incident exactly the way you should have." "By being terrified and doing what you told us," Sarah asked with a weak laugh. "By listening, by trusting the procedures, by not trying to be heroes." I started my end-of-shift checklist, going through the motions I'd performed hundreds of times before. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I wasn't doing it alone. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people want to investigate. They want to look in the car, or check the play place, or open the dumpster to see what's making noise. "And what happens to them?" Tommy asked quietly. I paused in my cleaning. "They don't work here anymore." The weight of that statement settled over us. We all understood now that those rules weren't arbitrary. They were literally the difference between walking out at the end of your shift and not. "So, what now?" Jake asked. "I mean, do we just come back tomorrow night and do it all again?" "That's up to you. Night shift isn't mandatory. You can transfer to days if you want. Plenty of people do after their first night." "But you don't recommend it," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "I recommend you think about what you learned tonight, about following instructions even when they don't make sense, about trusting your team, about staying calm under pressure." I finished wiping down the main prep area and moved to check the fryer settings one last time. Those are useful skills, no matter where you work. Tommy leaned against the counter, his usual grin replaced by thoughtful consideration. "You really think we could handle another night like this?" "I think you already proved you can handle anything this place throws at you." I checked the ice cream machine, still properly shut down, exactly as it should be. The question is whether you want to. Through the windows, I could see the sky beginning to lighten. Not quite sunrise yet, but close enough that the darkness was losing its grip on the building. The oppressive atmosphere that had defined the past 6 hours was fading, replaced by the normal energy of a functioning restaurant preparing for the breakfast rush. "It's getting light," Sarah observed, moving to look out the front windows. "Yeah, night shift officially ends when the morning crew arrives at 7 a.m. I checked my watch again. 6:52. 8 minutes. "And then everything goes back to normal?" Jake asked. "Everything goes back to normal. The equipment behaves properly, the customers are regular people, the play place is just a play place. Day shift thinks we're all paranoid weirdos who make up stories about haunted McDonald's equipment." Tommy laughed. "Can you blame them? If someone told me this story yesterday, I'd have thought they were crazy." "What changed your mind?" I asked. "Living through it," he said simply. The drive-through sensor chimed, and all 4 of us tensed automatically. Then I checked the time, 6:54 a.m., and relaxed. "Morning customer," I said. "Probably someone grabbing coffee before work. Sarah, you want to take it?" She nodded and moved to the register. "Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order?" "Large coffee, black, and a sausage McMuffin." A perfectly normal voice. No strange breathing, no odd pronunciation, no unsettling pauses. Just a regular customer ordering regular food. "That'll be $4.79. Drive around to the first window." Jake already had the McMuffin warming and Tommy was pouring the coffee. Normal breakfast prep, normal procedures, normal teamwork. But there was something different about the way they moved now, more confident, more aware, more coordinated. The customer paid with a credit card, said thank you, and drove off with their order. Standard transaction from start to finish. "See?" I said. "Normal." At exactly 7 a.m., the morning crew started arriving. Janet, the breakfast supervisor, came through the back door with her usual cheerful energy, followed by 2 prep cooks and a cashier. They moved with the brisk efficiency of people who'd done this job for years, chatting about weekend plans and complaining about the traffic. "Morning, Marcus," Janet called out. "How was the night?" "Quiet," I replied, which was technically true. The last hour had been very quiet. "Good. I hate when you night shift people leave us messes to clean up." She started checking the equipment, making sure everything was ready for the breakfast rush. "Ice cream machines down. Routine maintenance should be back up by 7:30. "Fine. Sarah, right?" Janet looked at our newest team member. "How was your first night?" Sarah glanced at me, then back at Janet. "Educational. Well, you survived, so that's something. Most people don't make it through their first week." Janet moved on to check the fryer settings. "Tommy, Jake, you 2 ready to go home?" "More than ready," Jake said, but he was looking at me, not Janet. "Same time tomorrow night, Mr. Torres?" I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe this team might actually work out. "Same time," I confirmed. 11:30 for prep. Open at 2 a.m. "We'll be here," Sarah said firmly. "All of us," Tommy added. Jake nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." As the morning crew took over the restaurant, transforming it from the strange, threatening place it had been all night back into a normal fast food establishment, I gathered my things and prepared to head home. The recruits collected their belongings too, moving slowly like they were reluctant to leave. "Mr. Torres?" Sarah said as we walked toward the employee exit. "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything. For keeping us safe. For teaching us the rules. For not giving up on us when we didn't believe you." Jake stepped forward. "She's right. I was ready to quit after that first incident with the knocking. But you kept us together. You made us listen. And you made us better," Tommy added. "I know it sounds weird, but I feel like I learned more about myself tonight than I have in months." I looked at the 3 of them, tired, still a little shaken, but standing tall with the confidence that comes from surviving something that would have broken most people. They'd come into this shift as typical summer hires, inexperienced, overconfident, unprepared for what the real world could throw at them. They were leaving as something else entirely. "You listened," I said finally. "You learned. You trusted the team even when you were scared." I paused at the exit door, my hand on the handle, and looked back at them one more time. Maybe you'll last the summer after all. As we stepped out into the crisp morning air, the sun was finally breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The parking lot was filling up with breakfast customers, normal people living normal lives, completely unaware of what had transpired inside the restaurant just hours before. The night shift was over. The rules were dormant again until sunset. But for the first time in 8 years, I was actually looking forward to tomorrow night. These kids had earned my respect. More importantly, they'd earned each other's. And in a job like this, that might just be enough to keep them alive.